Earlier this year, I was invited to a screening of Hard to Believe. Hard to Believe is a documentary about executing Chinese prisoners and taking their organs for transplant to other people and giving them to other people who need an organ. And this could include kidneys, livers, hearts, lungs, other vital organs. The majority of these prisoners are practitioners of Falun Gong, as you've heard, which is a peaceful Buddha school practice. It also includes Uyghur and Tibetan political dissidents, I understand. Now, the documentary Hard to Believe is about these people taken into custody and executed for their organs. The scale is enormous. From best evidence available, it appears that hundreds of thousands of prisoners have been executed for their organs since the year 2000. Now, I have to admit that I've walked past Falun Gong protests of this kind before, especially in attending ethics conferences internationally. And I didn't stop because I couldn't believe the claims. They're hard to believe, just as the documentary says. Earlier this year, I was invited by colleagues to see the documentary, and I became convinced that this is happening. I'm a professor of ethics and medicine. The parallels to what was happening to Jewish prisoners and others in Nazi concentration camps in Germany were too obvious to ignore. After seeing the documentary, I felt as though I was living through another Nazi German Holocaust in which Jews were being executed in concentration camps, and Poland, simply because of their religious and racial association. Worse than that, these prisoners in China are being held in camps, having all their vital statistics taken, blood type and so on, and then executed on demand when a suitable recipient makes a booking for surgery to receive a kidney or heart, liver or other organ. And this is so obviously wrong, it hardly needs to be said. It violates fundamental human rights, including the right to life, right to a fair trial, right to liberty, the right to be free from torture. I felt stunned after seeing this documentary. I felt as though I was downwind from the smokestacks at Auschwitz. This time I had to do something, and I'm doing what I can to bring attention to these atrocities. So what evidence is there that this is true? Well, the evidence is compelling. Initial investigations were carried out by Western journalists and lawyers. David Mattis, David Kilgore, Eaton Gutman. None of them had an axe to grind against China, but it appears that China has admitted to transplant of organs and claims that these organs were from criminals who'd been executed. But their claims don't stack up for a number of reasons. There are not enough of them. The number of executions in China per year is a state secret, but the numbers of executed prisoners, estimated by international human rights groups, do not match what's known about organ transplant activity. Also, prisoners make poor donors for a number of reasons, health reasons and so on. And these organs are being made available on demand, which is not compatible with the Chinese law. If a prisoner is sentenced to death, the execution has to be carried out within a week. But it's possible to book a transplant in China several weeks into the future, including for heart, liver, and so on, which requires the death of the quote-unquote donor. Also, the rise in organ transplantation coincided with the persecution and incarceration of Falun Gong practitioners. Many practitioners refuse to reveal their identities in order to protect their families, so that leads to a large pool of unidentified or anonymous prisoners in good health who are, quote, not on the books. They can be killed with impunity. And the Falun Gong persecution began in July of 1999. Organ transplants in China began doubling and tripling from the year 2000. There have been some Falun Gong prisoners released from prison, and they've reported medical examinations that make no sense at all. Their blood is tested, their corneas are examined, there are ECGs, abdominal ultrasounds, x-rays and physical tests of various kinds. These tests only make sense if the prisoners are being checked for their suitability as for organ transplantation. Also, covert investigators have telephoned some of the hospitals involved and asked, obviously in the local language, specifically whether the organs would be healthy, whether they would be from Falun Gong donors, and on many occasions they were told yes, the organs would be from Falun Gong practitioners. The number of transplants performed in China is a key piece of evidence and could not be accounted for by the number of convicted criminals. More accurate estimates are based on the number of hospitals that are doing these transplants, the number of transplant beds in each hospital and their occupancy rates, the number of trained staff, the number of transplants performed by individual doctors, the amount of transplant research and training that's going on in China and beyond China. There's a huge income attributed to transplants, and there's been a growth of domestic anti-rejection drug research in China. The Chinese government has offered no evidence to dispute the claim that Falun Gong practitioners and others are being killed to supply organs for transplant. So it's my belief that China is transplanting a large number of organs each year, far more than they admit to. They keep the volume of activity secret because there's no way to explain where the organs come from. They keep it secret because the source is unspeakable. China's own citizens being executed for their organs. If there was an innocent explanation, they could simply make it public. So what can we do? My action is to try and publicize these atrocities. I'm hoping that you too will give this your attention by letting your friends know, speaking to people at work. If you're like me, once you know about it, you won't be able to stand by without protesting. What I'm suggesting you might do is sign the petition at the table here. The other possibility for you is to go onto a website called End Organ Pillaging. That's END, End Organs, Organ Pillaging. On that website, you'll be able to see the same documentary that I spoke about in the beginning, Hard to Believe. And I'm sure you, like me, would want to let other people know this is going on, because ultimately we need to bring pressure on China to stop this atrocious activity. Thank you very much for your attention.